What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host, who does the most, Ethan Smith. I hope you all are having a phenomenal Friday as you kick off your weekend. It's going to a pretty fun week. It is, of course, Friday, November 19th. I almost said Tuesday, November 19th. I'm 3 days behind, but Thanksgiving is next week. I hope you all are planning to have a phenomenal week. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day every single day here on Locked On Pirates on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, every Friday we are joined by Mr. Adam Bittner, where today we will be once again bringing up the Kevin Newman to the Yankees rumors and what could be going on with all of that. Bryan Reynolds, of course, finished 11th in MVP voting yesterday, and the highest ranking he had was 7th on someone's board, so we'll get into that as well as Bryce Harper wins MVP and some general offseason thoughts so far of some things that have happened, really revolving a lot around the starting pitching market, but me and Adam will give our thoughts on what we've seen this offseason so far. And again, thank you for making me your first listen of the day every single day. You can listen on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. And with all that said, let's get right into today's episode.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And when the music hits and we have a guest, you already know they're going to be on the screen when we come back on YouTube, or you're going to hear their voice if you're on audio. Thank you all again for tuning in today on Friday, November 19th. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith. To my right, when I'm looking at screen, and to my left, technically, I guess, however it works on YouTube and screens. I still haven't gotten this down yet, Adam. But Adam Bittner is here as he is every Friday. Adam, how are you doing this week? Everything going wonderful in the college football, baseball, or whatever you're covering this time world?
Well, I guess it depends upon your perspective. Penn State and West Virginia fans probably aren't too happy at this point, but it's been a fun season, keeping us busy. Got some Chargers Steelers this week too, so still a lot going on.
Yeah, Chargers Steelers is going to be an interesting one just because of the COVID-19 stuff that's been surrounding that game right now. Also, I still really wish Pitt didn't lose to Western Michigan because I think they'd have a real claim for the college football playoff. But, oh well, things happen, right? But as I always mention when I bring up some stuff like that, this is a baseball podcast here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And I brought it up briefly yesterday, but I wanted to wait for you to come on and really talk about this Kevin Newman on the Yankees radar stuff. Of course, it is rumored that the Yankees are not going to go after a Carlos Correa or a Chris Taylor or a Corey Seager or one of these top shortstops. I don't know why. I mean, you have the money, I'm sure. Just go do it. But after that happened, there were some rumor mills going around that Kevin Newman was officially on their radar, apparently. And, I mean, you look at the trades that we've made with this team already before, where we pick up Roenzi Contreras, Miguel Yajure, Caden Smith-Njigba, and Michael Escato for Jamison Taillon. Then you pick up Hoy Park and Diego Castillo for Clay Holmes. It's like if they trade Kevin Newman to the Yankees again, what are you really poaching from a farm system that you've already poached a lot of already?
Well, I think I would look at this a little bit differently just because Kevin Newman did struggle at the plate so much this year. Clearly the Yankees are betting on some kind of positive regression, especially in that batting average and balls in play category, where he really struggled this year. And he was, I don't know where he ended up finishing, but he was down in the low 200s for a lot of the year. And we know most players just by laws of averages finish around 300. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, do I think Kevin Newman's ever going to be a fantastic hitter? That's hard for me to say, but I do think he can be better than what we saw in 2021. And I think if the Yankees make a trade like that's what they're banking on. So if that's the deal, they're not necessarily looking to, necessarily just go straight for trading prospects for a veteran. I think you might be able to make more of a, what I like to call baseball trade, where it's, players are of similar value, change of scenery guys, maybe we could be looking at a big league roster type of guy rather than a low A prospect. Because I think that would make a little bit more sense for both teams, because the Pirates certainly still have some holes, and maybe instead of going out and signing a free agent this offseason, you bring in, what I like to call a quad A player, a guy who's kind of a fringe major leaguer that maybe just needs the right opportunity to kind of go crazy. So I think the Pirates have a lot of options if they decide to make a deal here, and the only option is trading for low level minor leaguers. I think you could look for someone at the AAA, AAA level with big league experience on his resume, or maybe even a little bit, maybe he's on the 25 man. I'm not sure, but that's, if I was the Pirates trying to make that deal, I would be considering something like that, because I think the Yankees would be considering it too.
So usually how it works, I think, with Yankees fans is if I'm doing this right, it's usually Frazier and Andujar, right? That's usually like what it is. It's one of those two guys whenever they're talking about big trades and stuff. That's usually what that's the joke that's been going around, is it's like, how about Jasson Dominguez? I'm like, yeah, okay, guys, let's it's a funny joke when you do it a couple times, but then when you do it multiple times, it's not really that funny anymore. But maybe they could also be looking at Kevin Newman, and you mentioned his bat. Maybe they could be looking for the positive progression back in his bat. Maybe they're really also trying to get him for his defense as well. I mean, we also, I think some people forget already, even though it was very recently, that Kevin Newman was a Gold Glove finalist at shortstop. The Yankees love defense. They need defense, realistically, over there in the Bronx. And who better to have it than a guy who arguably could have won the Gold Glove at shortstop and had the best fielding percentage of all NL shortstops this year. I mean, that's really another way to look at it as well, on top of the fact that if he gives you realistically, a guy like Kevin Newman, to kind of sum it up, if he gives you a 250, 260 average and the same defensive output that he gave in 2021, you're going to take that every day of the week. You're not expecting the guy to hit 300. You're not expecting him to hit 30 home runs. You're expecting him to go up there, get a hit every once in a while, maybe put one over the fence every once in a while, but keep his defensive output very strong. And do you think that's what the Yankees could really be looking at? Is, we know we're getting a strong defensive shortstop if we get Kevin Newman, but we could also be getting the bat, as you mentioned before.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you could also look at it from the perspective of maybe there's an opportunity for them to acquire a heavier hitter down the road. And then you kind of have Kevin Newman, who has positional flexibility, on your bench and available to stick in late innings. And you have a guy that you can trust a little bit more at the plate. But I think you're right. He doesn't have to be, a silver slugger type of guy at shortstop. He only has to kind of hit his weight, as people say. And I think Kevin Newman's capable of doing that. I think that is, in the numbers. He's never going to be a great hitter. He's definitely never going to have a lot of power. But is he going to be able to do just enough? I think we've seen that in his Pirates career. We just didn't see it this year. So, positive regression would be the play here for the Yankees, like I said. And, I think there's a lot of options if you're the Pirates in terms of how you want to proceed. And I wouldn't look at this as purely like a Josh Bell, Jamison Taillon style deal, because I think they have more options than that.
Oh yeah, of course. And I like how we were able to bring this up. Again, there's no official report that the Yankees are looking at Kevin Newman. Nobody's came out and said we really are talking to the Pirates, and Ben Cherington hasn't said anything. Obviously, a lot of GMs are going to keep things close to their chest, but something you shouldn't keep close to your chest and you should be open to the world about is consuming Built Bar, Adam. Built Bars are phenomenal. I am, of course, ready for Thanksgiving. All the great food and treats are awesome, and there are plenty of them, but maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't full of calories and sugar. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is your new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. That means low calorie, low carb, low fat, and high protein, and also covered in 100% chocolate. Built is a great option for when you're hungry on Thanksgiving. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or two. New surprises are coming all month. Limited time flavors are arriving at BuiltBar.com regularly, so check the site often. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday. Mark your calendar. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. Go to BuiltBar.com right now and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your next order when you invest in the best protein bars on the market. Now, of course, yesterday we were talking about a lot of offseason stuff before we came on the pod. Bryce Harper ended up beating out Juan Soto for the NL MVP spot. Shohei Ohtani, I'll get into the Shohei Ohtani thing in the third segment about like how people are about him being unanimous. I was very interested to see a lot of the takes that came out about that. But Juan Soto would finish behind Bryce Harper, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would finish behind Shohei Ohtani in terms of the NL and AL MVP voting. And Bryan Reynolds, by the way, for the season that he had, finished 11th in MVP voting, and his highest spot was 7th. What are your rash thoughts of seeing Bryan Reynolds not even crack the top 10 despite being an all-star starter and having one of the better seasons that you could have in the National League?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be the most valuable to a, 61 win team. And I think that's what you see is that, despite his best efforts, the Pirates still were what they were. And sometimes that's all it comes down to for a lot of these writers and baseball people is it's not about the season that you had necessarily on your own. Your own team factors in. And I think for Bryan Reynolds, there was a lot to overcome from that perspective. He's not the flashiest guy. You don't really see him in any television ads. He doesn't have a lot of exposure. So unless you're in NL Central City that's seeing him, multiple times per year, he's kind of more like one of those guys who's just on the sheet of paper. He's on your fantasy team. He's kind of a faceless guy nationally, I feel like. And, that's kind of what this reflects, because it's ultimately a popularity contest, right?
Yes.
The numbers end up being tiebreakers, but everyone knows who Bryce Harper is. I'm not sure Bryan Reynolds, is known by a whole lot of people outside of the NL Central and, actual baseball fans who are consuming stats and numbers every single day. So, that's just kind of the way it goes. And for him to get more respect, the Pirates are going to have to get more respect, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the idea, too, that he was even in the voting period. Of course, I believe he's the first Pirate to receive MVP votes since McCutchen in 2015. I believe Kutch finished 5th that year, if I'm not mistaken. I know he won it. Did he win it in 2013 or 2014?
I believe he won it in 2013.
Yeah, and that was, of course, our best year. But I agree 100%. I mean, a lot of the MVP voting across all of sports kind of bothers me a little bit, just because I believe it says most valuable player, right? And I mean, with Reynolds, I understand. Like, you take Reynolds off this team is still awful. Reynolds on the team, it was still awful. That's fine. But in terms of take Bryce Harper off of the Phillies, right? Are they even a near playoff team? They weren't a playoff team, but are they even near it, right? No. Same thing with Juan Soto. You take Juan Soto off of the Washington Nationals, they are abysmal. They are worse than the Pirates are right now, personally, in my opinion. The only things that kind of threw me off a little bit, and as you mentioned, it was a popularity thing. I didn't expect Corbin Burns to get above Bryan Reynolds. That was one that kind of threw me off. Also, I didn't expect who else was it? Realistically, seeing Brandon Crawford get up there too, I was like, that's an interesting one as well. But then again, you mentioned the winning, having the best record in all of baseball kind of helps that. But that's where I was getting into, though, is it's called most valuable player, not most valuable team. If you want to give a most valuable team award, go do that. Go give that to the San Francisco Giants or the Dodgers or whatever. But you guys usually do that when you say how much a team is worth. But when you look at how much these guys really first of all, they don't care about the awards. They really don't. Unless they win it, they don't care. Bryce Harper, if he didn't win it last night, he would have congratulated Juan Soto, moved on, and it would have came out and probably won it next year, right? But I mean, it really comes down to the idea that, as you mentioned, if they do want to, if he wants to ever get in that conversation legitimately, or the Pirates want to get anybody in that conversation legitimately, they're going to have to get back to their 2013 through 2015 ways.
Yeah, or at least being on the radar, I think helps because, like you said, the Phillies didn't make the playoffs, the Nationals didn't make the playoffs, and those guys still got a lot of votes. But let's also be honest, they play in big markets, right? They play in markets that are on national TV every week. I'm not sure how many national TV games the Pirates had this year. Right. So, and when they're good, I don't want to just play the small market thing. When the Pirates are good, they are on national TV. And, because people want to see Andrew McCutchen playing for a playoff contender. They wanted to see a lot of those guys in those years that the Pirates were good. So if the Pirates even get close to sniffing anything, they'll get those national TV games. And guys like Reynolds will get the exposure that you'd want to see. And, maybe that'll net them some more votes. Unfortunately, that's just the system that we live in. Is baseball is such a local, television driven sport. It's not like the NFL where every week we're seeing almost every game. If you want to watch Red Zone or if you want to get the direct TV package and all that, it's easy for a football fan to know what's happening around the sport. There's lots of national TV games that people watch every week. Baseball, because there's so many games, it's really hard to and because your team is playing every night too, it's really hard to see a lot outside of your market and outside of your division. And I'm actually kind of shocked that Corbin Burns got as many votes as he did too, because I feel like because the NL Central was such a snooze of a race this year, he probably didn't get a ton of exposure either, but I believe he won the Cy Young Award the other night, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so
very deservingly so.
Yeah, so exposure matters, and unfortunately that's the way it is. But and then there's also a level on which when we talk about Gold Gloves, it's great that Kevin Newman got votes and was nominated this time, because normally that ends up going to guys who are good hitters too.
Which never makes any sense to me.
Right. And again, I think that's an exposure thing. It's, who do these writers know? Who do these fans know? Who do people across baseball know? And I think that matters more than we would like it to, even though it's 2021. And if you really want to watch any game, you can. It's just not the way people consume the sport, even at this late date.
Now, I always seem to end up asking you a trivia question. Do you remember what that one nationally televised game for the Pirates was this year?
I have no idea. It
was Memorial Day against the Kansas City Royals. May 31st.
Yeah, I'm sure a ton of people were tuned into that one. Which channel was that on?
ESPN.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the only one that I can remember. I'm sure they were probably on like MLB TV or all the time, but I don't really consider that nationally televised because everybody doesn't have that channel, so that's not nationally televised to me. But that was interesting conversation about a lot of different stuff. I mean, again, I expect Bryan Reynolds to be an all-star again next year as well. I don't think he's going to take a fall off or anything. And that's something that you guys would like to bet on. You can go to betonline.ag. BetOnline.ag is back in better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season is here, and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus, meaning if you put $100 in, they will give you $50 of free money to bet on basketball, football, the NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts. So, Adam, I think we kind of got a little bit into the segment 3 stuff in that last section about some general off-season thoughts so far. been kind of quiet, not too much going on, which is kind of surprising with the looming CBA lockout potential on the horizon in just a couple weeks. So I really thought you would see a lot of more moves than we have. Um, but some of the moves have been pretty interesting. So what have been your initial thoughts on what you've seen from the offseason so far?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, in recent seasons we've seen a major delay in some of these deals being made. Just because teams no team wants to be the team that makes the first move, and I think that goes doubly this year because there's so much unknown that do you really want to make a deal when you don't know where the sport's going to be on the other side, when you don't know what the CBA is going to look like on the other side. Um, you know, Granted, I mean the lockouts. It's not probably if it's going to happen. It's going to happen at a fixed time. It's not going to wait until March or April to get started. So yeah, I think that's the issue is you don't really know what sport you're competing in, so it's hard to make deals right now. And we've seen teams be reluctant to do that even when a lockout wasn't looming. It kind of makes this time of year a lot less fun than it used to be, because you used to reliably be able to go into the winter meetings and know that there was going to be a ton of deals, both signings, trades, and that's where GMs were going to make their moves for the offseason so that they could wash their hands, go on vacation, go to a nice place, and not have to worry about making moves for the rest of the summer. I don't think that's where the sport is right now. So you'll see like a Noah Syndergaard deal pop up. But he's had some injury concerns, so I think that's the kind of move where someone wants to get in before someone else does, to kind of give him that that rehabilitation kind of deal. Excuse me, and yeah, it's just a crazy market, and it's hard to interpret. Just because we really there's so much we don't know yet.
Yeah, and I mean the Noah Syndergaard thing. I'm glad that you brought that up. I was just very surprised by that deal. I understand it's a 1 year deal, so you're not really taking a high risk on it. But it's also the guy's pitched like what, one game in the last 2 years, maybe. Like that was a very surprising deal to me. But so far, my favorite offseason move was Eduardo Rodriguez to the Detroit Tigers, just because I think that really that kind of move for Detroit really said, okay, it's not just rumors that we're going to be good next year. Like we're actually going to try to go out and get guys. Like yesterday, one of the biggest news stories, because it was funny, everybody was talking about it and trying to theorize about it. One of the biggest news stories yesterday was, of course, AJ Hinch and Carlos Correa having breakfast together. And apparently their conversation went so good that they started at breakfast and sat through lunch at this restaurant. So they had a phenomenal conversation. And I mean, Correa, maybe he stays, maybe he goes to Detroit to go play with AJ Hinch, who of course was a part of the Astros organization not too long ago. And it would be really nice to see if, Correa goes there too. The Tigers could really contend with the Chicago White Sox in the AL Central next year. That's the kind of moves that I like to see. And I mean, outside of that, you haven't really seen too much. I mean, Justin Verlander resigns. He's literally pitched 6 innings in the new decade. He did not play in 2020, and he only pitched 6 innings last year. Or no, he didn't play last year and pitched 6 innings in 2020. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch in Houston to see how he really turns out. But what are some predictions that you have for these big name shortstops? I haven't really asked you this, which is very wild that I haven't asked you this because I've had you on enough to where I feel like I probably should have. But where do you think a lot of these big name shortstops are going to end up? And don't say Pittsburgh.
Wow, yeah, there was no threat of that. I think with Correa, it's interesting because again, I think it depends so much on what does the market look like. What are the teams that are ultimately in it in the end? And given that there's supply and demand, what team wants what guy the most? There's just so much up in the air, and I think back to the Bryce Harper and Manny Machado negotiations, and I'm not sure anyone had the Padres on the board, but then the Padres kind of came on strong, and that made everyone in baseball kind of sit up and be like, well, why is my team not involved if the Padres are involved? So, I'm curious to see if there's a lockout or if we get a CBA quickly and it looks a lot like the current environment that we're in. Then maybe that leads things one way, but maybe if the CBA goes another way, then he goes with another team. So I think that it's hard for me to make a prediction because I have to see, kind of what the deal is for everyone.
Well, yeah, I mean, the topic of the CBA is very funny just because, I mean, I've seen everything from expanded playoff to war-based arbitration. How war-based arbitration would work, I don't know. I just that would be the biggest I'd have to talk about it on my podcast for 3 days to probably explain it to everyone to outlay it. And I mean, war-based arbitration, I guess. But also there's other things too about the salary cap or the salary floor. I've already said a salary cap would be the best thing. A salary floor would do nothing. Just because if you have a salary floor, all you're going to do is see deals like you see with Syndergaard and Verlander, where somebody goes out and signs a guy for 1 year, $30 million just to get over that floor, and then the team is still not doing anything. So I said that was a thing. The things that I want to see personally are probably a salary cap, maybe expand the playoff to one extra team because I really wanted to see the Blue Jays in the playoffs this year. So that's kind of a recency thing. I just really thought the Blue Jays did enough this year to deserve to be in the playoffs. And I mean, maybe fix the arbitration for players, but it's also, I say that I want to see that, but that's also kind of what the Pirates are banking their entire rebuild on right now is having guys on team control. So I think my top two things would be a salary cap and add one extra team to the playoffs. Is there anything that you could if you were in the room talking to the general managers and the owners and the players and the CBA in general, what is one thing you would say to them and say this is what we need in baseball?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you and say I think I would like to see a salary floor before a salary cap because I think we already do have kind of an unofficial salary cap in baseball. At least that's the way the teams behave, whether it's that way or not. But, with the luxury tax threshold, teams very rarely want to go above that. And I think that caps a lot of what the big markets can spend. Does that mean that I think that baseball is equal in terms of markets? Absolutely not. I think the big markets definitely do have an advantage in free agency. But I think there would be something to be said for having a team like the Pirates being forced to, go out and sign a guy or two who's making a lot of money, because I think that would objectively make them better at this stage of their rebuild. And I think it would make them more interesting. And I think the more interesting teams you have, the better sport you have. And I think the big problem with baseball right now is that there's just so many teams that are not trying, and because they're incentivized to do so. And so I think, if you're able to go get, if you're forced to go get some decent players, and you're forced to have them on your roster, well, maybe if you start bringing these prospects up, if you're the Pirates this year, maybe you can stay in contention a little bit because you have a core of big league talent instead of, holes all over your roster and being truly awful. So I don't know. I think a salary floor, for baseball would force a lot more teams to actually compete. The reverse side of that in terms of what you're saying is playoff expansion. I think they might have to go hand in hand because, ultimately the reason teams don't want to go for it is because they know that their odds of getting a return are so low. Because baseball has such a small postseason. So I think, if the owners were going to give on a salary floor, they'd want to be getting something too. And I think playoff expansion might be part of that. So I think those two things could work hand in hand.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I also think that if you tell teams okay, you have to spend this this amount of money. Once you get a bunch of teams that are kind of spending around the same amount of money, and then even the Dodgers and them are still spending all their money as well, those teams that are in the middle are going to be fighting for one or two extra playoff spots, and that's going to make for September baseball just being that much more fun. And that's really what I think baseball is missing is after opening day, after the trade deadline, it's kind of it's like hipscotch or hopscotch. It's like opening day. Then nobody watches again until Memorial Day. And then nobody watches again until the All-Star break. And then nobody watches again until the trade deadline. And then after the trade deadline, it feels like everybody just kind of leaves. And then the trade deadline after that, it's like, okay, cool. My team got this player. I'll watch the games down the stretch now if I'm in a playoff race. But like, what incentive did any team that wasn't in the playoff race have to watch baseball from August till the beginning of October? That's really where I think baseball can fix a lot of things with the CBA is bring more competitive teams into it. And then you can have a lot more fan bases, a lot more fans in general, just watching baseball in that August and September month where their team has a legitimate shot at the playoffs.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, you're still going to have bad teams no matter what. I think we saw it with the Steelers this past weekend. Even the NFL has winless teams, but the NFL also has a lot more parity in the middle, and I think that's what we're talking about when it comes to the Pirates. Is you don't want to see these boom and bust cycles. Sometimes it would be nice just to be in the race. I believe it was 2018 when they made the Chris Archer trade and they ended up finishing over 500. We haven't had a ton of those kinds of seasons in Pittsburgh, and I think if baseball was more like that every summer around here, then either being good or being terrible, I think it'd be a lot healthier discourse. A lot more people would enjoy it a lot more on an annual basis, and so I think if you get more teams in that messy middle, it makes things more interesting, and that's kind of that would be my selling point of a salary floor, is that it would force the Pirates to. Okay, maybe you get Noah Syndergaard, right? And maybe you feel the need to compete for him and put him in your rotation because you're already light on pitching. And maybe if he has a great season, you can flip him for a prospect because you're still not as close as you'd like to be, and maybe you can get something good for him. I think that would have been a fun storyline for Pirates fans to watch it play out, but we're not there yet in terms of the economic model.
Oh, yeah, of course. And Adam, that is all phenomenal. Based on what most people say, the CBA is a little over 2 weeks away. So, like where they believe a lockout will happen, I believe is December 2nd or December 3rd. It is one of those days. But of course, every Friday, Adam will be here no matter what to cover and talk about anything that's going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Hopefully, a little bit more pretty soon. We'll see what goes on with what decisions they make in terms of the 40-man roster today, as that has to be done, I believe, by today for prospects. So we'll be covering that next week as well. Adam, tell all the fine people what you're up to this weekend and where they can find your work on Twitter and wherever else you are on any platforms.
Yeah, I'll be working Sunday Night Football for Steelers Chargers. I'll be up late with all of you and even later, unfortunately, publishing stories on post-gazette.com. So, if you're excited for the game, obviously there's some COVID issues, so you might want to stay tuned to the website too, just to see what the latest updates are from Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldo, and Brian Batko. We've also had Jason Mackey down in Florida all week for instructional camp. He's been talking to a ton of prospects. So if you want your Pirates fix, he's been down there and he has some news that I'm pretty sure very few people have. So definitely check out Jason's stuff in our Pirates section. And as always, I'll be doing bowl projections for our local college teams. So check those out next week too. And please consider subscribing because it helps us do the journalism we need in this town and in this market.
Oh, yeah, of course. And you guys already know you can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan. You can follow Adam on Twitter at FujiMaster24. That is with a G, not a J. I've had people ask me before. It is with a G. Realistically, if you just type in Adam's name on Twitter, you will find him. He is verified like me, so it's not hard to find Adam. But you guys can also follow this podcast on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pretty much anywhere where you can get your podcast. Adam, thank you so much for an awesome Friday episode. Guys, make sure you go check out Locked On Bets to go make some money today, heading into a fun football weekend again. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith of the Locked On Pirates podcast. That is Adam. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day every single day. And with that said, I will see you guys on Monday with Mr. Gary Morgan for Gary Morgan Mondays. Maybe stuff happens this weekend, but guys, have a phenomenal and safe weekend. I will see you then.